Welcome everyone to this new episode of Guitar Dudes. I'm John, and my co-host, as always,
B. Ryan.
B. Ryan, the B Train here again. Today we've got a really cool episode talking about drugs. Well, in rock and roll, but
Right.
how how drugs influenced rock and roll. And we're going to go all the way back to the classic rock period to show you and talk about where it really all began. So, what do you think, just from what you've heard, read, seen, listened to, how drugs affected rock and roll, particularly in the classic rock period?
Yeah, I don't know how it couldn't. I mean, there were so many drugs just available back then, dude.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, everyone did drugs in the 70s. It
right,
seemed like.
right.
But I don't know. You just had more of like the free, you know,
Mm-hmm.
free love, free, I mean, you had a lot of hippies, and
Yeah,
I think a lot of
yeah,
so, that that's got to go into it.
it has
I mean,
to.
there's no way it can't.
Right.
But but I don't know. But there, I mean, at the time, I mean, like when LSD and all of that stuff was going on, I mean, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Get some good music though.
Exactly, and that's
I
why I
don't know
think
how
this
you
topic.
function
Yeah.
in a studio. Yeah, I can barely record if I've had 2 glasses of wine,
Yeah.
just because all the controls and the. So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it's true because when you listen, in fact, I'm going to read a couple examples of some '60s songs just to show you. And I was talking to my dad because he graduated from high school in 1969, and I asked him what was that time period like. And apparently, here in Central Texas, marijuana was obviously around, but up until the early 70s, it hadn't really made its way here.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not saying that LSD and Coke and others weren't here, but it
Right.
wasn't near what it was. Once it hit the early 70s here in Central Texas, that's when things just,
Yeah.
it became more readily
Blew
available.
up.
It really
Yeah.
blew up. Now, before we really dive in, just to let y'all know, we're not condoning drugs. We're not recommending, hey, if you're a musician, take drugs. We're simply applying the influences that drugs has had on music. In fact,
Right.
I'll pull up a couple examples of lyrics, and we'll start with "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds" from the Beatles. And I love the Beatles. I'm sure you dig the Beatles too.
I was listening to the Beatles while I was setting up, since this is the drug episode.
There you go. So here's, I believe it's verse 2. Follow her
Hmm.
down to a bridge by a fountain where rocking horse people eat marshmallow pies. Everyone smiles as you drift past the flowers that grow so incredibly high. What's up
Yeah,
with
that's
that? What do you say to
like
that?
you didn't, you couldn't, you didn't write those lyrics down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Paul McCartney was probably on an LSD trip and just drew that out in pictures or something.
Him and Lennon were like, "Oh
No,
man, how do we get this song out of our heads? I know, let's drop some LSD, you
yeah,
know."
yeah. That no one wrote that in a notebook. That happened like at 3 a.m. on like the third day of a massive LSD trip, and
Yeah.
that's what they were singing.
Yeah,
So
they were seeing colors. And music, as we talked about last time,
yeah,
music it's colorful. Tones are colorful.
yeah. I
All
know. I
right.
kind of want to go on an LSD trip and see these things, but now you don't.
Yeah,
But thanks to the Beatles, you don't have to. You can just listen to Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and close
exactly.
your eyes, and you can kind of go.
Yeah,
Those songs kind of take you on a trip,
they
you know.
do. Yeah, it's a trip-free trip.
So it's a
All right.
trip-free trip. You can
Yeah. Let him. Let
you
yeah.
can
Let
still make it to work in the morning.
let the Beatles take you. Let them do the LSD, and let the music then take you on a ride.
Yeah.
So this second example comes from "Blinded by the Light." It's another song from the first British invasion. "Blinded by the Light" by Manfred Mann's Earth Band. Just the name of the band tells you that they're on drugs.
What's the name of the band?
Manfred Mann's Earth Band.
Why haven't I heard of these guys? Mansford's Man's Earth
Earth
Band.
Band. I mean, we've heard the song
Yeah.
"Blinded by the Light." In fact,
Yeah.
one of the
Yeah. That they
you
did
know
that. Okay.
yeah, revved
They
up like
did,
a deuce, another
uh,
runner in the light. And a lot of people think that they were saying douche because of their English accent, their British accent, but it's actually deuce, not douche. So
huh.
here's verse one. Now, right out of the gate, they went on a trip. So here's verse one. Madman's drummers, bummers, Indians in the summer with a teenage diplomat in the dumps with the mumps as the adolescent pumps his way into his hat. Oh boy. With a boulder on my shoulder, feeling kinda older, I tripped the merry-go-round with this very unpleasant sneezing and wheezing. All right.
Sounds like a Dr. Seuss poem.
Pretty much.
You know,
I mean,
it's like who's a who. Yeah,
pretty
I mean
much.
they're. I mean, whoever wrote the lyrics in that band obviously was in charge of coming up with the name. The Mumford
Yeah.
Mo.
And it just
Yeah,
the teenage diplomat
yeah, that's
pumps
crazy.
into his hat. I'm like, I mean, we try to keep the show PG-ish, but that part right there, I don't know what to say to that. I don't think I should say what I think I'm.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just.
right,
But and even my mom was
man.
saying, we would jam to on the record player, and we'd kind of sing along. But when I read her the lyrics, she's like, that's crazy. What is this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I'm always kind of guilty of kind of a guitar nerd. I'll always sort of focus on the guitar, and the instrumentation versus the lyrics.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a lyricist.
Hmm.
I mean, I can write lyrics, but I write guitar player
Hmm.
style lyrics. You know what I mean? Like I'm not
Yeah.
Bob Dylan. But you know, but going in and reading some lyrics of some
Hmm.
songs, like if there's a word or a phrase, it's like I don't know what that is. You can go look it
Hmm.
up on your phone. But
Hmm.
you look, you read through it, like this is some deep stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
um, especially like some Alice in Chains stuff, like from the '90s, where
Yeah.
they were just swimming in heroin, and uh,
Yeah.
and there's some
Yeah.
deep. I mean, most of their
Yeah.
lyrics are about drugs, or about
Yeah.
heroin and kind of the struggle and all of that.
Hmm.
Um, that's
Which, yeah,
some scary stuff.
it is in
Even a
fact.
lot
Well,
of
yeah.
even a lot of Nirvana songs. I mean,
Hmm.
you try to make sense of some of his lyrics.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
And because it's such a deep topic, that's why that we'll probably cover more on this, more of the modern, how it's affected more of like the music that Brian just mentioned with Nirvana and Alice in Chains and sort of the whole grunge movement. Because if you think about it, you had the hippie movement, the free love movement in the '60s, but it seems like that in the '90s we kind of had this, or I should say, another counterculture movement with grunge, and we can get more into
mm-hmm,
that on the next episode. But doesn't it feel like that we've kind of come back
yeah.
around on that?
Oh, I think we that totally reminds me. Now we've got to have a grunge episode.
Yeah.
I'm totally
Yeah.
stoked about that.
Oh
But no,
yeah.
yeah, I think we have because it's and there were even some other, like, remember it, like
Hmm.
in the '90s we had country kind of blew up, but what also blew up
Hmm.
was country.
Yeah.
Like grunge had blown up, but country blew up is what Garth Brooks
Yeah.
kind of
Clip.
did for country,
Hmm.
like what Nirvana did for rock and roll.
Yeah.
Um, And I don't know. I think country had a lot more drinking though, which is a drug in
Yeah.
itself.
Well,
But I
and
mean,
that's yeah, yeah.
you listen to some old Hank Williams and stuff. I mean, that
Mhm.
was written. You know, a lot of that stuff was written with a bottle of Jack. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Right there. I mean, and there's some pretty deep, deep stuff there too.
yeah.
Um,
It's not
so I don't
just
know. I guess that's
drugs,
the
you know.
question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and to me, it's not
alcohol.
just drugs. It's yeah, alcohol, tobacco, uh, narcotics, legal and illegal. I mean, people are popping pills, you know. So
Hmm.
that's why that I don't want to just leave it as drugs as far as illegal narcotics like marijuana, cocaine, heroin, and LSD, but just all of the different influences, and I think it's an influence to me. I mean, I love having a beer when I write, when I record. It kind of mellows
Hmm.
me out.
Yeah,
I don't need hard drugs. I mean, beer is that's just enough for me, but
yeah,
but I mean, just think about how all of this influence. When you mention, sort of the '90s movement, which we'll talk about more next time. What, or I should say, how did all that start? Where? I mean, because with Hendrix and the Stones and the Beatles, I mean, all of that influenced the music that we listened to, when we were teenagers, and now it
hmm,
influences us. So it just goes to show you that drugs in any shape, way, or form, any fashion,
yeah,
it affects especially us as musicians. It definitely affects
hmm,
us because we're drawn to music
yeah,
that was written on drugs.
yeah. And it's hard to you know to keep up with writing. I mean,
Hmm.
and especially if that's your day job. I mean, if it's you
Yeah.
if and a lot of these, if you watch these documentaries, they're these guys are they turn to these drug cocaine and everything,
Hmm.
just because the pace they have to work at,
Yeah.
touring constantly, and drugs are just everywhere on these
Hmm.
tours, um, because your body is just put through, you know, just a nightmarish pace. And then, but at
Yeah.
the same time, your record label's like, okay, we need the next album, we need the next hit,
Hmm.
so after your 100th show, we need an album. I mean, and so, and I don't know, you have to, I don't know how you could go through something like that sober. I mean, there's
I don't
look
either.
at the ratio. I mean, it's a pretty tight, musician to druggy, you know, if you're a musician, there's a, they make up a
Yeah.
pretty good number of drug users. One,
Hmm.
if nothing else,
Yeah.
cigarettes.
Yeah. A lot of musicians smoke.
Yeah.
They
Oh, I used to
yeah.
love cigarettes before I quit smoking. Man, I could sit there and I do the Eddie Van Halen. Did you ever do that where you put the
And
cigarette
yeah.
right there behind the nut and you could
Yeah.
just trail off? And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
But
good
it
times.
yeah. I mean, look at Keith Richards. Okay, well, how in the hell is he still alive? I mean, the guy. I'm assuming he still does drugs. I mean, you got people like Eddie Van
Oh yeah,
Halen, some of these that, or who's the lead singer for Soundgarden? Chris
Chris
Cornell.
Cornell.
All these people are dying. In their 40s and 50s. Eddie was in his, I think, early 60s. And you
Yeah.
got Keith Richards. He's pushing 80 if he's not there already. And
Oh my God. Yeah. There's. It's funny because I just watched a documentary the other day on him. It's one on Netflix called Keith Richards Under the Influence, and
see,
it's
that'd be good to
killer.
watch. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 2 hours. It kind of follows them around with a camera, and oh yeah,
Hmm.
he he, and back in the '80s, he lived in Jamaica for a while.
Really.
Um, oh yeah, yeah, he's always, there's no shortage of drugs with this dude, but I think he's just, I think all of his veins and stuff are just so crystallized. You know what I mean? That
They have to
you
be
can't do any more harm.
right.
Like you're like your car can only get so dirty on the outside.
Yeah.
Where nothing else can penetrate. So
That's the only explanation.
I heard he smokes like 2 to 4 packs a day.
It's something crazy. I mean, he wakes up consuming either caffeine or alcohol And I think for breakfast or lunch, he does a line or two of Coke, and just kind of goes about his day from there. But
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. Speaking of Keith Richards, so I just want to make sure that I get this name right. So back in the, I'm going to say the mid 60s, so 64, 65, Keith Richards had a girlfriend named Linda Keith. Keith and Keith. So Linda Keith, she was
Mhm.
a model. I don't think she was an actress. She might have been, but she was a model. And she heard Jimi Hendrix play. This is before Jimmy was Jimmy, like popular, and
Right.
she heard him play. I think it was in New York, I believe, and just loved his music. So she is the person who got Jimmy going. She got
Hmm.
Jimmy to fly to England, and that's really where Jimmy got started, was in England. But she was the person who got Jimmy started on LSD.
Man, it's always a woman, isn't it? Speaking of songwriting too and drugs, Pink Floyd,
Hmm.
I know at least in their later years, because their early stuff was pretty trippy in and of itself.
Yeah,
But like when Gilmore pretty well took over, do you know he doesn't really write songs? His wife does.
really, I didn't know that.
He records the basics of the song, basically the song on an acoustic guitar. His
Yeah.
wife puts it in her headphones and just walks along the beach. And she's kind
Huh.
of a poet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she writes most of the lyrics for Pink Floyd. So
Wow.
that and she writes them. Uh, at least the documentary I saw, she wasn't tripping on anything. She was,
Huh.
and like David Gilmour, I mean, his studio
Yeah.
is a like a houseboat, um, where it's probably way different than the '70s where they just had a big block of coke
Yeah.
with a hammer and a chisel, but
Yeah.
but now it's real peaceful and serene
Yeah.
and um but anyway, but that's where a lot of their lyrics these days come from. So I guess it is
Nice.
possible to be creative without
Yeah.
a needle and a spoon, but is it as fun? You know?
It's okay. And just to kind of wrap it up and just to kind of sum it up, music as we know it today, and we're talking about the classic rock period, the 60s to the 80s, so first British invasion all the way to the second. Would music be the same without some sort of drug or other substance or subsequent influence? Would it be the same?
Not a chance.
No.
I don't think so. No, no, I don't think lyrically, musically, not at all. I don't think so.
Mm-mm. And
So
plus, some of the studio practices, I was reading about the Beatles, and uh, they were doing things in the studio. Same thing with Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. He loves spending
yeah.
all of his time in the studio. Again, he was on an LSD trip. I read about it when he was recording or writing California Girls. But you got to think, studio equipment was starting to really develop. You had multi-tracking thanks to Les Paul, so they were coming
Mm-hmm.
up with different studio practices. It wasn't just writing the music. It wasn't just lyric or
Mm-hmm.
melodic bass, but it was also the studio practices that they were doing that were so innovative that nowadays we wonder how would we get that sound.
Yeah. 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 I mean, and a lot of times, I mean, it's like the technology, because as this music was coming out, and these bands were coming out, I mean, the
Mhm.
technology had to keep up with it. So you had
Yeah.
your amp companies, your guitar companies, and everything kicking out all this new gear that
Hmm.
these hippies didn't know how to use,
Right.
and um, so the more they gave it to them, the more that's where you got all your wicked sounds and all your you just gave them a bunch of toys to play with, and I think
Yeah.
you
I
had a
mean,
lot of you had a lot going into the stew there in the
mhm.
'70s and '80s too. And I think today, I
Yeah.
don't know, I don't know why music sucks so bad today. But
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I don't know, maybe people need to start doing drugs again.
What's we're
After we
We're
just
not
say we
recommending.
didn't condone, not the viewers,
Not the viewers, not the viewers,
but
but
some of you bands out there,
we're just
just
we're
do drugs for a little while, and then
just
record, and then get.
and then go to rehab, get cleaned up.
Well, I
A
mean, even the rehab, you could make a whole reality show out of that.
lot of musicians have done that. So wash, rinse, repeat. So you're saying do drugs, but only for a little while, just to get the album out.
Just enough, yeah, just enough to get the album out. Well, it's like getting some Novocaine. Like, you don't do Novocaine all the time, but
Right.
if you happen to be going in to get your tooth drilled, you're
Mhm.
going to want a little Novocaine.
Right.
So you got to pair the drug with the activity.
That's I don't know what to say to that. So
Maybe that's a good way to wrap her up. You know?
Brian's got me speechless. So don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us, and comment below if you have any comments on drugs, your drug of choice, why you should not do drugs. Whatever your comments are, we want to hear them. And also, you can follow Brian and I on Instagram. You can follow Brian at Brian Clarity and me at John3
Yes.
Music.
All right.
We'll see you next time.
Until next time.